A little girl pays for a Hell's Angels gas, with the few coins she's been saving for new shoes. Everyone at the gas station stares, thinking she's made a huge mistake. But the next morning, her life changes forever, because 100 roaring motorcycles pull up outside her house. And these bikers aren't here for trouble. They're here for her. They say she showed one of their own more kindness than the whole town ever did. They fix her porch, bring food, toys, and hope, until the whispers start. People call her mom a criminal's friend. The town turns cold. The job she needs to survive is suddenly on the line. But when tragedy strikes the man they came to thank, the same people who judged them are forced to face what true goodness really looks like. Can one small act of kindness heal an entire town's heart? Or will fear and prejudice destroy the miracle that love began? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The heavy clouds hung low over Kentucky that afternoon, painting the world in shades of pewter and slate. Lucy Turner's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white with exhaustion after another long shift at the hospital. In the rearview mirror, she caught glimpses of her daughter, Ellie Mae, who sat quietly in the back seat, hugging her precious glass jar filled with coins, savings from months of household chores and birthday money meant for new shoes. "Mommy," Ellie's voice piped up. "Can we stop for snacks? Please?" Her big brown eyes, so much like her late father's, met Lucy's in the mirror. Lucy checked the fuel gauge, which hovered just above empty. "Well, we do need gas anyway, sweetheart." She signaled and turned into Jerry's Gas and Go, a weather-beaten station that had seen better days. The peeling paint and flickering sign spoke of hard times that seemed to touch everything in their small Kentucky town these days. As Lucy pulled up to the pump, the rumble of a motorcycle caught their attention. A large man in worn leather wheeled his bike to the adjacent pump. Even from inside their car, Lucy could see the tension in his broad shoulders, the way his movements seemed weighted with something heavier than just fatigue. "Stay in the car while I pump the gas, Ellie," Lucy said automatically, but Ellie was already unbuckling her seatbelt, jar clutched to her chest. "But Mom, I want to get a candy bar, please. I brought my own money." She shook the jar, making the coins jingle. Lucy sighed, knowing this particular battle wasn't worth fighting. "Okay, but wait for me." Inside the station's fluorescent-lit interior, the air felt thick with tension. The biker stood at the counter, his wallet open, face set in lines of quiet desperation as he tried his card again. The cashier, Tommy Jenkins, who'd gone to high school with Lucy, shook his head with undisguised disdain. "Still declined, mister. Can't let you pump if you can't pay." The biker, Lucy could now see the name Ryder patched onto his vest, kept his voice low and controlled. "Look, I know it's in there. Try it one more time." Other customers pretended not to watch, but Lucy saw their sideways glances, the way they edged away from the counter. She recognized the judgment in their eyes, the same look she'd gotten after Tom's accident, when she'd struggled to make ends meet those first few months. Before Lucy could step forward, Ellie slipped from behind her. The little girl walked straight up to the counter and stretched up on her tiptoes, placing her jar beside the card reader with a gentle clink. "You can use my money, sir," Ellie said, her voice clear and kind in the stunned silence. "It's okay." The biker, Ryder, stared down at Ellie, his weathered face softening with something like wonder. "That's real sweet, little lady, but I couldn't—" "Please?" Ellie pushed the jar closer. "Daddy always said if someone's stranded, help them get home." Lucy's heart clenched at the mention of Tom's words. She watched as Ryder's shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in something closer to grace. "You sure about this?" he asked, looking from Ellie to Lucy. Lucy stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder. "It's her money to give, sir. And, she managed a small smile. "Thank you for being kind enough to accept it. Sometimes that's harder than offering." Tommy counted out the coins with obvious reluctance, while outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The other customers shuffled their feet, some looking away in shame, others whispering behind their hands. Ryder carefully folded his receipt and tucked it into his wallet. He knelt down to Ellie's level, his movements gentle despite his imposing size. "Thank you, miss. Your daddy taught you right." Rain began to patter against the windows as Ryder walked out. They watched through the grimy glass as he mounted his bike, the water darkening his leather jacket to black. The motorcycle's engine roared to life, and then he was gone, disappearing into the gathering storm. In the car, Lucy helped Ellie buckle up, her mind whirling. Had she just allowed, even encouraged, her daughter to give away months of savings to a complete stranger? What kind of message had she sent? But then she remembered the look in Ryder's eyes, the quiet dignity in how he'd accepted Ellie's help, and the pure, unquestioning kindness in her daughter's gesture. "Mom?" Ellie's voice was thoughtful as Lucy started the car. "Did I do good?" Rain streaked down the windshield as Lucy considered her answer. The line between mercy and recklessness seemed suddenly blurry, like the world outside their windows. She thought of Tom again, of his unwavering belief in helping others, even when it wasn't the easy choice. "You showed kindness, baby," Lucy finally said, her voice soft but certain. And kindness is never wrong. As they drove home through the gray afternoon, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened in that run-down gas station. She didn't know if she'd taught her daughter about mercy or recklessness, maybe both. But she did know that Ellie's simple act of generosity had touched something real and true in that moment. The rain continued to fall, washing the world clean, while Lucy drove carefully through the storm, carrying her precious daughter and a heart full of complicated pride toward home. The morning sun streamed through Lucy's bedroom window, painting warm stripes across her quilted bedspread. She was just reaching for her alarm when Ellie's excited footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Mom! Mom! Come quick!" Ellie burst through the door, still in her butterfly pajamas, her honey-brown hair a mess of tangles. "There's something on the porch!" Lucy sat up, instantly alert. "Honey, wait!" But Ellie was already racing back down the hall. Lucy hurried after her, pausing only to slip on her robe. When she reached the front door, she found Ellie bouncing on her toes, pointing at a pristine white shoebox sitting on their welcome mat. "Can I open it, please?" Ellie's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Lucy hesitated, examining the box carefully. It was a name-brand shoebox, clean and new-looking. "Let me check it first, sweetie." She picked up the box and brought it inside, setting it on their small kitchen table. Ellie climbed onto a chair, practically vibrating with excitement as Lucy lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a pair of bright pink sneakers, exactly the kind Ellie had been saving for. Beside them sat a small teddy bear wearing a tiny leather vest and a red bandana. Lucy's throat tightened as she lifted out a folded piece of paper. The note was written in careful, steady handwriting. "Thanks, Angel. You reminded me what matters." "Ryder." "They're perfect," Ellie squealed, already trying on the shoes. "Look, Mom, they fit just right." Lucy watched her daughter twirl around the kitchen, the new sneakers flashing pink against their worn linoleum floor. Her heart felt full and uneasy, all at once. The gift was thoughtful, generous, but it also meant this stranger knew where they lived. Can I wear them to school? Please? Ellie hugged the teddy bear to her chest, its bandana brushing her chin. Lucy checked the time. They were already running late. Okay, but breakfast first. Quick now. As she packed Ellie's lunch and helped her get ready, Lucy's mind kept returning to the shoebox. The kindness of the gesture warmed her, but a small voice of caution whispered in the back of her mind. In their small Kentucky town, people noticed everything and talked about it all. The drive to school was filled with Ellie's chatter about her new shoes and bear, which she'd named Ryder Bear. Lucy smiled at her daughter's joy, even as she scanned the streets more carefully than usual. Remember, Lucy said as she pulled up to the school, if anyone asks about yesterday. I'll tell them the truth, Ellie declared proudly, that I helped someone who needed it, just like Daddy taught us. Lucy watched her skip into the building, pink shoes flashing, and whispered a prayer for guidance. Later that afternoon, Lucy moved through her rounds at Riverside Care Center, checking on her elderly patients. As she adjusted Mrs. Patterson's pillows, she couldn't help overhearing the conversation at the nurses' station. Did you hear about the biker trouble at Jenkins Station? That was Sandra, one of the younger nurses. My cousin works there. Said some rough character was causing problems. I heard he tried to use a stolen credit card. Another voice chimed in. Lucy's hands stilled for a moment. Mrs. Patterson patted her arm gently. You look troubled, dear, the old woman said softly. Lucy managed a smile. Just tired, Mrs. Patterson. How's your pain today? But the gossip continued to drift through the open door. Well, I heard Tommy Jenkins say some little girl gave him her money. Can you imagine? Parents these days, letting their children near those types. Lucy focused on her work, checking vital signs and dispensing medications, but each whispered conversation seemed to find her. By the end of her shift, she'd heard a dozen versions of what happened, each one painting Ryder darker than the last. The afternoon sun was starting to fade when Lucy pulled up to the elementary school. Ellie climbed into the car, her usual bounce slightly subdued. How was your day, sweetie? Lucy asked, already sensing something was off. I told everyone about helping the nice man at the gas station, Ellie said, fiddling with Ryder Bear's bandana. Joey laughed and said only bad people ride motorcycles, and Sarah said her mom told her he was probably a criminal. Lucy's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you say to that? I said they were wrong. Ellie's voice was small, but determined. He was nice, Mom. He said thank you and everything, and look what he gave me. She lifted her feet, showing off the pink sneakers. Bad people don't give presents, do they? At home, Lucy made dinner while Ellie did her homework at the kitchen table. The evening settled around them with its familiar routine. Dishes, bath time, story time. But Lucy felt the weight of the day's conversations pressing on her heart. As she tucked Ellie into bed, the little girl clutched Ryder Bear close. Mom? Why do people think he's bad just because he rides a motorcycle? Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Ellie's hair. Sometimes people don't understand things that are different from what they know. And sometimes being kind means others won't understand why we did it. Like when Jesus helped people nobody else would? Ellie asked, remembering their Sunday school lessons. Exactly like that, Lucy whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Your heart knew what was right, and I'm proud of you for that. After Ellie fell asleep, Lucy stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the low rumble of a motorcycle engine, growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared into the hills. She thought about the shoebox, the careful handwriting on the note, and the judging whispers at work. The sound faded away completely, leaving only the cricket song and her own thoughts about kindness, judgment, and the complicated ways God sometimes chose to teach his lessons. Lucy touched the window glass, cool against her fingertips and watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening Kentucky sky. The Wednesday morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Lucy heard it, a deep, thunderous rumble that made her coffee cup tremble on the kitchen counter. At first, she thought it might be construction equipment on the main road, but the sound kept growing, getting closer and closer to their quiet street. Ellie, still in her pajamas and munching on cereal, perked up. "What's that noise, Mama?" Lucy stepped onto the worn wooden porch, and her heart skipped a beat. Coming up their gravel road was a sight that made her grip the railing. Dozens of motorcycles, chrome gleaming in the morning light, rolling forward in perfect formation. They filled the entire street, their engines creating a symphony of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of their small house. "It's him, Mama!" Ellie's excited shriek made Lucy jump. Her daughter burst through the screen door, bare feet pattering on the wooden boards, her dark hair flying wild around her face. "It's Ryder!" Sure enough, at the head of the convoy was a familiar figure. Ryder Jacobs guided his motorcycle to a stop in front of their house, cutting the engine. The others followed suit, and suddenly the morning was eerily quiet, except for the soft ticking of cooling engines. Lucy's neighbors were beginning to peer out their windows, curtains twitching with barely concealed curiosity and concern. Mrs. Henderson across the street didn't even try to hide her surveillance, standing right at her picture window with her arms crossed. Ryder dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. He was wearing the same leather vest as before, but today Lucy noticed the patches and insignia that covered it. Behind him, other bikers, men and women of various ages, were climbing off their machines. Their appearance might have been intimidating with their leather, tattoos, and weathered faces, but their manner was respectful, almost formal. "Good morning, Miss Turner," Ryder said, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were kind, just as Lucy remembered. "Hope we didn't wake you too early?" "Good morning, Ryder," Ellie called out, waving enthusiastically. She was bouncing on her toes, showing off her pink sneakers. "Look, I'm wearing them." A smile softened Ryder's face. "They look perfect on you, Angel." He turned to address Lucy. "Ma'am, I hope you'll forgive the invasion, but my friends here insisted on coming once they heard what your daughter did." A woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight braid stepped forward. Despite her leather jacket and boots, she carried herself with a dignity that reminded Lucy of her grandmother. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Most folks call me Silver. We're Ryder's family, not by blood, but by choice." One by one, the bikers approached the porch, each carrying something. They introduced themselves with names like Doc, Preacher, and Mama Bear. Each one had a story in their eyes and respect in their voices as they spoke to Lucy and Ellie. "She helped one of ours," said a tall man with kind eyes and military tattoos on his forearms. "We don't forget kindness." He handed Lucy a thick envelope. Others followed with bags of groceries, wrapped packages of toys, and warm clothes that looked to be exactly Ellie's size. Lucy stared at the envelope in her hands, feeling overwhelmed. "I can't accept this," she started to say, but Ryder held up a hand. "It's not just for you," he explained. "We know about the community center that's falling apart, the one that runs the food bank and after-school programs. This is for them, in honor of what Ellie taught us about genuine kindness." Ellie had made her way down the porch steps by now, fearlessly approaching the group of bikers. A woman with intricate flower tattoos covering her arms knelt down to her level. "You remind me of my daughter," she said softly, touching Ellie's cheek. "She would have been about your age now." Lucy watched as her daughter hugged the woman without hesitation, and something in her chest tightened at the way the biker's tough exterior crumbled for just a moment. The visit lasted less than 15 minutes, but it changed everything. Before they left, Ryder handed Lucy a business card with a phone number written on the back. "If you ever need anything," he said simply, "we take care of our own, and as far as we're concerned, you and Ellie are family now." The convoy departed as precisely as it had arrived, the thunder of engines gradually fading into the distance. Lucy and Ellie stood on the porch, watching until the last bike disappeared around the corner. The morning felt strangely empty in their wake. Throughout the day, Lucy felt the ripples of their visit spreading through the community. At the grocery store, the cashier gave her a wide berth. At the post office, conversation stopped when she entered. She tried to focus on the good they could do with the donation, but anxiety gnawed at her edges. That evening, after tucking Ellie into bed with Ryder Bear clutched tight in her arms, Lucy's phone rang. The hospital's number flashed on the screen, making her stomach clench. She wasn't scheduled to work until tomorrow. "Lucy, this is Sandra from HR." The voice was professional, but held an edge of discomfort. "Could you come in early tomorrow? Mrs. Whitaker wants to speak with you." "Is everything all right?" Lucy asked, though she already knew it wasn't. There was a pause. It would be best to discuss this in person. But Lucy, you might want to stay clear of bad influences if you want to keep your position here. You understand what I'm saying?" The line went dead before Lucy could respond. She sat in her darkened kitchen, the envelope of donation money on the table before her, fear mixing with a strange sense of awe at what her daughter's simple act of kindness had set in motion. Through the wall, she could hear Ellie's soft breathing as she slept, innocent and unaware of the waves she had created in their small town's quiet pond. Lucy touched the business card Ryder had given her, tracing the numbers with her finger. The choice before her seemed impossible. Security or solidarity, safety or standing up for what she knew in her heart was right. Outside, crickets sang their evening song, and somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle's engine echoed off the hills. Lucy sat in the growing darkness, watching the last rays of sunset paint her kitchen walls gold, wondering how such a small jar of coins could have bought something so much bigger than gas for a stranger's motorcycle. The Saturday sun painted long shadows across Lucy's front yard when the familiar rumble of motorcycles approached. This time, only 3 bikes made their way up the gravel drive, Ryder's sleek black Harley leading 2 others. Lucy stepped onto her creaking porch, wiping suddenly sweaty palms on her jeans. Ryder cut his engine, and the sudden quiet felt heavy with possibility. He dismounted, pulling work gloves from his back pocket. Behind him, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and a woman with a silver braid down her back also climbed off their bikes. "Morning, Lucy," Ryder called out, his voice carrying a warmth that didn't match his rough exterior. "Brought some friends who know their way around carpentry. Noticed your porch was looking a bit tired last time we were here." The wooden boards beneath Lucy's feet groaned in agreement. She'd been meaning to fix the sagging porch for months, but time and money always seemed to slip away. "Oh, you don't have to," she started, but Ryder was already pulling tools from his saddlebags. "We want to," he said simply. "Besides, can't have our favorite little angel taking a tumble through rotted boards, can we?" As if on cue, the screen door banged open and Ellie burst out, still in her Saturday morning pajamas decorated with cartoon horses. "Ryder," she squealed, then stopped short at the sight of the other bikers. "This here's Mike." Ryder gestured to the older man, who tipped an imaginary hat. "And that's Sarah. They've built half the homeless shelters in 3 counties. Sarah's weathered face broke into a surprisingly gentle smile. "And you must be the famous Ellie Mae. Ryder hasn't stopped talking about you since the gas station." Ellie beamed, gravitating toward Sarah's bike where intricate Celtic knots were painted along the fuel tank. "Are those like your tattoos?" she asked, pointing to the similar patterns that wound around Sarah's exposed forearms. "Sure are, sweetheart. Want to hear the story behind each one while we work?" Lucy watched as her daughter settled cross-legged on the lawn, completely captivated by Sarah's tales of each tattoo. Meanwhile, Mike and Ryder were already examining the porch's support beams, speaking in low, technical terms about lumber and load-bearing posts. "Got some 4x4s in the truck," Mike said, jerking his thumb toward a pickup that Lucy hadn't noticed parking quietly behind the motorcycles. "Should have this stabilized before sundown." The morning unfolded in a rhythm of hammering, sawing, and easy conversation. Lucy brought out a pitcher of fresh lemonade and watched as these supposed troublemakers worked with skilled precision. Mike turned out to be a retired contractor who now dedicated his time to charity builds. Sarah had been a nurse herself before arthritis forced her to change careers. She now ran a women's shelter in the next county over. As the afternoon wore on, more of Lucy's tension melted away. She found herself laughing at Mike's terrible dad jokes and swapping hospital stories with Sarah. Ellie flitted between the adults, asking endless questions about motorcycles and helping to hand tools to Ryder. It was during a late afternoon break, when Mike and Sarah had gone for more supplies, that Ryder finally opened up. He and Lucy sat on the newly reinforced steps, while Ellie dozed in the porch swing, worn out from her day of supervising. "She reminds me so much of my Jessa," Ryder said softly, watching Ellie sleep. His voice carried a weight that made Lucy turn to study his profile. "Would have been 7 years old, too." Lucy's heart caught. "What happened?" she asked gently. Ryder's hands tightened around his lemonade glass. "Drunk driver, 3 years ago. I was driving. Rain-slicked roads. Nothing I could have done differently, according to the police report, but..." He swallowed hard. "Lost my baby girl. Lost my faith. Lost myself for a while there." Lucy reached out instinctively, placing her hand over his rough, work-worn knuckles. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, thinking of her own loss, different but no less devastating. "That day at the gas station," Ryder continued, "watching your little girl offer up her savings like that, it was like seeing Jessa again. That pure heart, you know? No judgment, just kindness." He cleared his throat. "Made me feel human again. Seen. Like maybe God wasn't finished with me after all." Lucy felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, understanding completely. "Ellie has a way of doing that," she said. "Sometimes I think she sees right through to people's souls." "You've raised her right," Ryder said, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were a startling blue, filled with both pain and hope. "Takes a strong woman to raise a child, that compassionate on her own." Lucy felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. For the first time since Tom's accident, she felt truly understood. This man, with his scarred hands and gentle heart, knew what it was to lose everything and still choose kindness. The moment was broken by the sound of cars slowing as they passed the house. Lucy glanced up to see Mrs. Peterson from church driving by for the third time that hour, her face pinched with disapproval. Another car followed, this one containing the Wilsons from down the street, their heads craning obviously to stare. Ryder noticed, too. His shoulders tensed slightly as he stood, brushing sawdust from his jeans. "Guess we're giving the neighborhood something to talk about," he said with a resigned half-smile. "Let them talk," Lucy surprised herself by saying, though her stomach knotted at the thought of tomorrow's whispers. By dusk, the porch was transformed. New support beams stood strong beneath fresh boards, and the steps no longer creaked. Mike and Sarah had headed home, but Ryder lingered, helping Lucy clean up the worksite. "Thank you," she said as they gathered the last of the tools. Not just for the porch, but for sharing about Jessa, for understanding. Ryder nodded, his eyes soft in the gathering darkness. Thank you for letting us help, for not judging us by our leather and tattoos. As if to underscore his words, another car drove by slowly, its headlights illuminating them like actors on a stage. Lucy could almost hear tomorrow's gossip. The widow Turner, keeping company with that biker gang, and with a child in the house. But as Ryder started his motorcycle and gave a final wave, Lucy couldn't bring herself to care about the whispers. She stayed on the porch long after the sound of his engine had faded, looking up at the emerging stars. The evening air was cool against her face as she weighed her fears against the undeniable rightness of what was happening. Ellie's small hand slipped into hers. I like them, she said simply. They make you smile like Daddy used to make you smile. Lucy squeezed her daughter's hand, torn between the fear of small-town judgment and the growing certainty that something profoundly good had begun that day. Something that went far beyond a repaired porch or unlikely friendships. Something that felt, despite all logic, like hope taking root. Monday morning arrived with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Lucy felt it the moment she walked through the hospital's automatic doors, the way conversations hushed as she passed, how smiles turned tight and professional. Nancy intercepted her before she could reach the nurse's station. We need to talk, she said, pulling Lucy into the break room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Nancy checked to make sure they were alone. The board had an emergency meeting yesterday, Nancy said, her voice low. Your name came up, Lucy. They're concerned about your associations. Lucy's hands trembled as she hung up her coat. My associations? Those bikers. Nancy's face softened with worry. Look, I've known you for years. You're one of our best nurses. But people talk, and when those talk gets to the wrong ears... They're good people, Lucy cut in, straightening her scrubs. They helped fix my porch. They brought groceries for families in need. Honey, I know your heart's in the right place, Nancy sighed. But this is a small town. Perception matters. Dr. Henderson specifically mentioned his concerns about having someone with questionable judgment handling patient care. The unfairness of it stung. I've never given anyone reason to question my judgment in 5 years here. Things are different now. You're a widow with a young daughter, entertaining a bunch of what, Nancy? Lucy's voice was quiet but firm. Veterans, charity workers, people who showed more Christian kindness than half the church congregation? Nancy's face flushed. I'm just trying to help you keep your job. Before Lucy could respond, her phone buzzed. Her heart sank when she saw the school's number. Mrs. Turner, this is Principal Matthews. We need to discuss something that happened with Ellie this morning. 20 minutes later, Lucy sat in the principal's cramped office, listening to how her daughter had spent recess alone, how other children whispered and pointed, how one boy had called her biker trash and made her cry. We've spoken to the boy, Principal Matthews assured her, but perhaps it would be best if Ellie kept certain aspects of her home life private. Lucy's hands clenched in her lap. My daughter showed kindness to a stranger. That's the only aspect of our home life that matters. The day dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. Lucy moved through her rounds mechanically, checking vitals and dispensing medications, while trying not to notice the whispers that followed her. When evening finally came, she found Ellie subdued, picking at her dinner. Am I bad, Mama? She asked suddenly. Jenny said her mom says we're keeping bad company. Lucy's heart cracked. No, baby. You're the opposite of bad. Sometimes people are scared of things they don't understand. But being kind is never wrong. A familiar rumble outside made them both look up. Through the kitchen window, Lucy saw Ryder pulling up on his motorcycle. He carried something under his arm as he walked to the door. "I wanted to thank you," he said when she opened it, "for what you said at the store earlier. The cashier told me how you stood up for me when those ladies were talking." Lucy remembered the encounter. Two women from her church discussing that criminal element loudly enough to make sure she heard. She'd finally turned and told them exactly what she thought about judging people they didn't know. "Come in," she said, suddenly not caring what anyone might think. "We were just having dinner. There's plenty." Ryder hesitated, then stepped inside. He pulled out an old photo album from under his arm. "I brought something to show you." They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from bowls of beef stew as Ryder opened the album. "This is Jessa," he said softly, pointing to a photo of a little girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. "She loved pink too, just like Ellie." Ellie leaned in close, studying the pictures. "She's pretty," she said. "Did she like bears like me?" "She collected them." Ryder smiled, but his eyes were wet. "Had about 50 of them on her bed. Used to drive her mom crazy, trying to make space for them all." More photos followed. Jessa on her first bike, at the beach, blowing out birthday candles. With each one, Ryder shared a story, and gradually the tension of the day melted away. Laughter filled the small kitchen as he described Jessa's attempt to teach their cat to swim, or the time she decided to give herself a haircut the day before school pictures. Lucy found herself sharing, too. Stories about Tom, about Ellie's first steps, about the day they brought home the porch swing. It felt natural, this sharing of memories, this gentle unfolding of grief and joy. The sun had long since set when Ryder finally closed the album. "Thank you," he said. "For dinner, for listening, for—" He glanced at Ellie, who had fallen asleep at the table, still clutching the little biker bear he'd given her. "For reminding me there's still good in the world." Lucy walked him to the door, but something made her pause before opening it. She pulled back the curtain slightly, and her breath caught. Two patrol cars sat idling across the street, their presence both obvious and ominous. Ryder saw them too. His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is exactly what I didn't want to happen. You and Ellie shouldn't have to deal with this kind of scrutiny." "We're not doing anything wrong," Lucy said, but she found herself whispering, as if the watching eyes could somehow hear. "No, we're not," Ryder agreed. "But I know how these things go. Small towns have long memories and short patience for anything different." Lucy closed the curtain, the warm glow of dinner fading into a cold knot of unease. But when she looked at Ryder, she saw the same pain and dignity she'd recognized that first day at the gas station. A good man, carrying burdens no one bothered to understand. "They can watch all they want," she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "I won't let fear of gossip stop me from being decent." Ryder's eyes met hers, full of something that looked like gratitude and regret mixed together. He opened his mouth as if to say more, then simply nodded and slipped out into the darkness. Lucy locked the door behind him, listening to his motorcycle start up and fade away. In the kitchen, Ellie stirred slightly, the stuffed bear tucked securely under her chin. Lucy stood for a long moment watching her daughter sleep, feeling the weight of choices and consequences settling around her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Through the closed curtains, the patrol car lights cast shifting shadows on her living room wall. Lucy turned away from them, focusing instead on gathering dishes and tucking away the photo album. Simple, normal tasks that felt like small acts of defiance against the watching world outside. The rumble of motorcycles had become a familiar sound in their quiet Kentucky town. Every weekend, like clockwork, the bikes would appear, bringing with them an unexpected wave of change. On this particular Saturday morning, the biker brotherhood was scattered across the church grounds, paintbrushes in hand. The white picket fence that had stood weathered and gray for years was slowly transforming under their careful attention. "Looking good, boys," Ryder called out, wiping sweat from his forehead with a bandana. His leather vest was speckled with white paint, but he didn't seem to mind. Lucy watched from the church steps, a tray of lemonade balanced in her hands. The scene before her felt almost surreal. Tough-looking bikers with gentle hands, making sure every picket got 2 even coats. "Miss Turner!" Mrs. Henderson, the church secretary, hurried over. "I just wanted to say, well, this is simply wonderful. We've been trying to get that fence painted for 3 years. Lucy smiled, noting how Mrs. Henderson's initial nervousness around the bikers had melted into genuine appreciation. "They're good people," she said simply. The following week found them at the community center, where broken windows had left the building vulnerable to rain and wind. The Brotherhood worked efficiently, measuring and cutting glass, teaching local teens who'd shown up to help. "See here," one biker named Mike was explaining to a group of fascinated boys. "You gotta be real careful with the edges. Safety first, always." The teens nodded, soaking up every word from a man they might have crossed the street to avoid just weeks ago. The changes spread through town like ripples in a pond. When word got out that the bikers were mowing lawns for elderly residents, more people began to notice. Mrs. Wilson, who'd lived alone since her husband passed, couldn't stop talking about how they'd fixed her squeaky gate, too, refusing any payment. One sunny afternoon, while the Brotherhood worked on repairing the community center's playground, a little girl with pigtails showed up with her grandfather, one of the bikers named Dave. Ellie's face lit up at the sight of another child. "This is my granddaughter, Sarah," Dave said proudly. "Thought she might like to play while we work." The 2 girls clicked instantly, their laughter echoing across the playground as they chased each other in an enthusiastic game of tag. Lucy sat with Ryder on a nearby bench, watching them play. "I've been thinking," Ryder said, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper covered in notes. "What if we organized something bigger? A charity ride. We could call it Miles for Kindness. Get sponsors for each mile, raise money for the community center's after-school programs." Lucy leaned in, looking at his rough sketches. "That could work. We could make it a whole event. Food trucks, maybe some local bands." "Exactly," Ryder's eyes lit up. "Show folks that different kinds of people can come together for good." As they planned, Lucy felt something shift inside her, a warmth she'd almost forgotten. That evening, after putting Ellie to bed, she found herself driving to the church. She hadn't been inside since Tom's funeral 3 years ago. The sanctuary was quiet, moonlight filtering through stained glass. Lucy slid into a back pew, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered to the empty room, "but I'm trying." Tears came then, but they weren't the bitter ones she'd grown used to. These felt cleansing, like rain after drought. She prayed for the first time in years, for wisdom, for peace, for the strength to trust again. The Miles for Kindness event gained momentum quickly. The Brotherhood gathered supplies, mapped routes, and reached out to local businesses for support. To everyone's surprise, the local news picked up the story. "The Girl Who Changed the Hells Angels," the headline read, accompanied by a photo of Ellie helping bikers stuff goodie bags for participants. The article told the story of that first act of kindness at the gas station and how it had sparked a transformation in the community. Lucy was folding laundry when the certified letter arrived from the hospital. Her hands shook as she opened it, though part of her had been expecting something like this. "Dear Mrs. Turner," it began formally. "Recent associations have raised concerns about professional conduct and hospital reputation. You are hereby required to appear before the Ethics Committee on Friday, June 15th at 2:00 p.m. Alternatively, you may choose to tender your resignation. Lucy sank into a kitchen chair, the paper crumpling slightly in her grip. Her heart pounded as she read the words again. Everything she'd worked for, her nursing career, her stability, her reputation, balanced against what she knew in her heart was right. Through the window, she could see Ellie in the backyard, still wearing the volunteer shirt from that morning's event planning meeting. Her daughter was carefully arranging donated supplies, humming to herself, completely unaware of the storm brewing around them. The letter trembled in Lucy's hands as voices warred in her head. Her practical side screamed about bills and security, while her conscience whispered about truth and courage. She thought about Ryder's quiet dignity in the face of judgment, about the Brotherhood's patient kindness as they proved themselves through actions rather than words. The paper crinkled as her fingers tightened around it, her heart racing with fear and something else, something that felt remarkably like determination. The morning of the Miles for Kindness ride dawned bright and perfect, without a single cloud marring the Kentucky sky. Lucy stood in her driveway, adjusting Ellie's pink helmet while motorcycles rumbled to life all around them. The chrome gleamed under the rising sun, and the air hummed with excitement. "Is it time yet, Mama?" Ellie bounced on her toes, already wearing the special vest the Brotherhood had made for her, decorated with patches that read, "Honorary Angel" and "Kindness Ambassador." "Almost, sweetheart." Lucy smoothed her daughter's hair. Her own heart was racing with a mix of nervousness and joy. She'd chosen to wear her nursing scrubs today, a silent statement about who she was and what she stood for. Ryder pulled up beside them, his bike freshly polished. "You ladies ready to make some history?" His smile was warm and steady, the kind that made Lucy feel like everything would be all right. "More than ready," Lucy answered, climbing onto the back of his motorcycle, while Ellie settled into the sidecar they'd specially attached for the event. The roar of engines filled the morning as over 100 motorcycles lined up behind them. The Brotherhood had spread the word far and wide, and chapters from 3 states had shown up to support the cause. Each bike bore a flag with a simple message: "Kindness rides." As they approached the town square, Lucy's breath caught in her throat. The streets were lined with people, not protesters or angry faces as she'd feared, but smiling townspeople waving American flags and holding homemade signs. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, pointing and cheering as the parade of bikes rolled past. "Look, Mama!" Ellie shouted over the engines, waving at her classmates who jumped up and down on the sidewalk. "They're all here!" Lucy saw familiar faces in the crowd, patients from the hospital, neighbors who'd once whispered behind curtains, even some of the hospital board members who'd questioned her judgment. They were all smiling now, dropping donations into the collection buckets held by Brotherhood members who walked alongside the parade. The procession made its way through Main Street, past the gas station where it had all begun. The owner stood out front, proudly holding up a sign that read, "Fill your tank with kindness." He'd pledged to donate 10% of the day's proceeds to their cause. At the town square, tables had been set up to receive donations. Local news crews filmed as people lined up to contribute. Lucy watched in amazement as check after check was handed over. For the orphanage, for the single mother shelter, for the community center's after-school programs. "Mrs. Turner," a reporter approached with a microphone. "How does it feel to see your daughter's small act of kindness grow into something this big?" Lucy pulled Ellie close. "It feels like a reminder that love multiplies when you share it. My daughter taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust in the goodness of others." The day stretched on, filled with music from local bands, the smell of barbecue from food trucks, and the sound of laughter. As the sun began to set, The celebration moved to the riverbank, where the Brotherhood had set up a massive bonfire. The flames reached toward the darkening sky as people gathered around, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. Children played tag in the grass, while their parents chatted with bikers, all barriers of prejudice seemingly melted away. Lucy found herself sitting on a log beside Ryder, watching Ellie twirl in the firelight with Sarah and other kids. The orange glow softened his weathered features as he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately," he said quietly. "About what we leave behind." "Oh." Lucy turned to look at him. "I want to make this permanent. Start a foundation. Call it Gas for Good. Help folks who are stranded, support community projects, maybe even set up a scholarship fund." He paused, watching the flames. "Your girl showed me that sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything." Lucy felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. She has a way of seeing straight to the heart of things. Like her mama. Ryder's voice was gentle. "You both helped me find my way back to believing in something bigger than myself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Ellie dance with her new friends. The firelight caught the sequins on her vest, making her sparkle like a living star. Lucy felt something settle in her heart, a quiet certainty that this was exactly where they were meant to be. Around them, members of the Brotherhood shared stories with townspeople, their laughter mixing with the crackle of the fire. Someone started playing guitar, and soon music filled the air. The smell of toasted marshmallows and wood smoke drifted on the evening breeze. "You know," Lucy said softly, "when Tom died, I thought I had to protect Ellie from everything, keep her safe in our little bubble. But she's the one who showed me that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all." Ryder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the best way to honor those we've lost is to keep our hearts open to love." As if hearing her name, Ellie ran over, her cheeks flushed from dancing. "Mama, Mr. Ryder, come dance with us!" Lucy laughed as her daughter tugged at their hands. The night was alive with possibility, filled with the kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, surrounded by exactly the right people. The bonfire burned late into the night, its flames a beacon of hope and change. The final count showed they'd raised over $20,000 for the community. But the real wealth was in the bridges built, the prejudices overcome, and the healing that had begun. All because a little girl had chosen kindness at a gas station one gray afternoon. As Lucy watched Ellie demonstrate her best twirl for an admiring group of bikers, she felt Ryder's steady presence beside her. No words were needed. They both knew that something profound had shifted in their lives, something that promised more chapters yet to come. The laughter and music continued around them, a celebration of not just what they'd accomplished, but of what they'd become. A community united by the simple power of choosing love over fear. 3 weeks after the Miles for Kindness ride, Lucy stood at her kitchen window, watching dark clouds gather over the Kentucky hills. The humidity pressed against the glass like a living thing, making everything feel close and heavy. Summer storms were rolling in early this year. She glanced at the clock. 2 hours until her hearing with the hospital board. Her nursing uniform hung pressed and ready on the door, a silent reminder of what was at stake. The past weeks had been a blur of paperwork and worried phone calls, but something unexpected had happened. Patients had started writing letters to the board, defending her character. Mrs. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher with arthritis, had written about how Lucy always took extra time to make sure she was comfortable. Mr. Rodriguez, recovering from heart surgery, spoke about her kindness during his darkest hours. Even Dr. Phillips, normally so reserved, had put in a good word. The hearing room felt smaller than Lucy remembered from her orientation years ago. She sat straight-backed in her chair as the board members shuffled papers and cleared their throats. "Mrs. Turner," the chief administrator began, "we've reviewed the concerns about your associations. However, we've also received an unprecedented number of character testimonials." Lucy's hands twisted in her lap as they discussed the Miles for Kindness event, its positive impact on the community, and her spotless work record. In the end, they issued only a formal warning about maintaining professional boundaries. She could keep her job. The relief was short-lived. That afternoon, the sky opened up. Rain hammered against windows and flooded streets. Emergency alerts buzzed on phones across town. Flash flood warnings, roads washing out, families stranded. Ryder called as Lucy was helping Ellie with homework. "Brotherhood's mobilizing," he said, his voice steady against the storm's background roar. "Got folks trapped in the low-lying areas. We're loading up supplies, water, medicine, food." "I'll come help," Lucy said immediately, already reaching for her rain jacket. "No." Ryder's tone was firm but gentle. "Stay with Ellie. We've got enough hands, and someone needs to be ready at the hospital if things get worse." Lucy wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said instead. "Always am, darlin'." She could hear his smile through the phone. "Just like your girl taught us, helping folks get home." The hours crawled by as Lucy watched the Mau news. Footage showed motorcycles navigating flooded streets, their riders delivering supplies to stranded families. She recognized many of them: Mike with his silver beard, Sarah in her bright yellow raincoat, Ryder leading the way. Ellie sat at the window, pressing her nose against the glass. "They're heroes, Mama," she said proudly. "Just like Daddy was." The phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Lucy's hands shook as she answered. The voice on the other end was official, detached. "Mrs. Turner, this is Highway Patrol. There's been an accident." She moved on autopilot, calling her neighbor to watch Ellie, pulling on her uniform, driving through sheets of rain. The emergency room lights cut harsh shadows across worried faces as she burst through the doors. Dr. Martinez met her in the hallway. His face told her everything before he spoke. "Drunk driver crossed the median. Hit him head on. We did everything we could, Lucy." The words washed over her like the rain outside. She stood frozen, her uniform soaking wet, her mind refusing to process what she was hearing. Ryder Jacobs, the man who'd helped repair her porch, who'd made Ellie laugh, who'd shown an entire town how to look past appearances, was gone. The next morning's newspaper lay on her doorstep like an accusation. The headline screamed across the front page, "Hell's Angel hero or criminal?" The article mentioned his past troubles, his recent charity work, the circumstances of the accident. But it couldn't capture who he really was. The gentle way he listened to Ellie's stories, how he always took his coffee black but sweet, the plans he'd had for the gas for good foundation. Lucy found herself in Ellie's doorway as dawn broke, watching her daughter sleep. The stuffed bear Ryder had given her was tucked under one arm. His bandana, left behind after their last dinner together, was clutched in her small hand. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world that felt somehow emptier. Ellie stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "Mama, why are you crying?" Lucy crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her daughter close. How could she explain that sometimes life took the best people, that sometimes kindness wasn't enough to keep someone safe? "I'm crying because someone very special has gone to heaven," she whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears. "Someone who taught us all about second chances and looking with our hearts instead of our eyes." Ellie's grip on the bandana tightened. "Mr. Ryder?" Lucy nodded, unable to speak. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting patterns on the wall that reminded her of motorcycle chrome catching the sun. Her faith, so recently restored, trembled like a candle in the wind. "He's with Jessa now," Ellie said softly, naming Ryder's daughter. "And Daddy. They'll all watch over us together." Lucy held her daughter closer, feeling her heart shatter and heal and shatter again. The bandana in Ellie's hand was worn soft with use, carrying the faint scent of leather and wind and hope. Everything Ryder had represented. Outside, the world was quiet, as if nature itself was pausing to mourn the man who had shown them all how to believe in second chances. The days following Ryder's funeral blurred together like watercolors in the rain. Lucy watched as the bikers packed up their tools and supplies, their chrome-laden motorcycles growing smaller in her rearview mirror. The police had made it clear. Their presence was destabilizing the community. On Tuesday morning, a certified letter arrived from Memorial Hospital. Lucy's hands trembled as she read the formal language. Administrative leave without pay, pending review of public image concerns. The words stung like antiseptic on an open wound. Her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who used to bring over cookies every Sunday, now hurried inside when Lucy walked past. The church ladies who'd praised the Miles for Kindness event crossed the street to avoid conversation. Even the gas station attendant who'd witnessed Ellie's first act of kindness barely met her eyes. "Mama?" Ellie's voice came small and uncertain one evening as Lucy tucked her in. "Does heaven have motorcycles?" Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Ellie's hair. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Mr. Ryder loved his motorcycle so much. It would make him sad if he couldn't ride anymore." Tears welled in her daughter's eyes. "And I want him to be happy up there with Jessa and Daddy." Lucy pulled Ellie close, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "I think heaven has everything that makes people happy, and I bet Mr. Ryder is teaching Daddy how to ride right now." After Ellie fell asleep, Lucy found herself in the kitchen, staring at Ryder's note propped against the cookie jar. The paper had grown soft at the creases from being unfolded and refolded so many times. "Thanks, Angel. You reminded me what matters." Such simple words that had changed everything. The house felt too quiet, too empty. At 11:37 p.m., Lucy grabbed her keys and drove through the sleeping town. She parked at pump number 3 at Miller's gas station, the same pump where Ellie had offered her shoe money to a stranger. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting strange shadows across the concrete. Lucy rested her forehead against the steering wheel. "God," she whispered, "I know I haven't talked to you much since Tom died, but I need a sign, something to tell me this all meant something, that opening our hearts wasn't a mistake." The rumble of a motorcycle broke the night's silence. Through her tears, Lucy watched a familiar figure dismount, Mike, one of Ryder's oldest friends. His leather vest bore the same patches as Ryder's, though more weathered. He walked to pump number 3 and placed a single white rose at its base. When he noticed Lucy in her car, he didn't seem surprised. "Ryder said you'd come here," Mike said, softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Said you'd know what to do when the time was right." "What to do about what?" "The foundation. Gas for good. He left papers with his lawyer. Everything's set up, just waiting for someone to take the lead." Mike's eyes were kind behind his graying beard. "He said the girl with the jar of coins would know how to keep it going." Before Lucy could respond, Mike swung back onto his motorcycle and disappeared into the night, leaving only the rose and the echo of his words behind. Lucy stepped out of her car, picked up the rose, and inhaled its sweet scent. The gas station's lights flickered, reminding her of that gray afternoon when her daughter's compassion had started it all. She thought of Ryder's gentle hands fixing her porch, his quiet stories about Jessa, the way he'd shown them all that redemption wasn't just a word in Sunday service. The rose felt warm in her hands, as if carrying the last traces of summer. Lucy knew she wouldn't let Ryder's memory fade into just another sad headline. His legacy, their legacy, would live on in every act of kindness, every stranger helped, every life touched by unexpected grace. She drove home slowly, the rose on her passenger seat like a promise. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, under the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, Lucy finally understood what Ryder had meant about remembering what matters. It wasn't about approval or reputation or even safety. It was about having the courage to see the good in people, just as her 7-year-old daughter had done with her jar of coins and her unfettered heart. Lucy sat at her kitchen table late into the night, her pen moving steadily across paper as she poured out their story. She wrote about a little girl with a jar of coins who saw past appearances, about leather-clad angels who painted fences and fixed porches, about a man named Ryder Jacobs who found redemption through a child's kindness, only to lose his life helping others. When she finished, her hands were stained with ink and her cheeks with tears. The next morning she walked her letter to the Millbrook Herald's office, hands trembling as she handed it to editor Jim Carson. "Mrs. Turner," he said, adjusting his reading glasses, "I've been wanting to hear your side." 3 days later, the Sunday edition hit doorsteps across town. The front page headline read, "The Kindness Ride, the girl who changed a community." Lucy's words filled the entire center spread, accompanied by photographs of the bikers' charity work and the Miles for Kindness event. The response began slowly. First came a letter from Nancy at the hospital, apologizing for not standing up for Lucy sooner. Then Mrs. Peterson from the church brought over a pie and tears of remorse. The mailbox filled with cards, each containing small donations for Gas for Good. One morning, Lucy found a red gas can on her porch, filled with quarters and dimes. A note attached read, "For the next stranger who needs help." More cans appeared, on porches, at the gas station, outside the community center. Children emptied their piggy banks, inspired by Ellie's example. The story spread beyond their small town. A motorcycle website shared it, then a national news blog. Lucy's inbox filled with messages from bikers across the country, sharing their own stories of Ryder's impact on their lives. "We'll keep his dream alive," they promised. Ellie's smile returned, bright as summer sunshine, when she saw people stopping by with their contributions. She helped Lucy count each donation, carefully logging every cent just as she had with her original shoe fund. One evening, as the Kentucky sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lucy stood in her backyard watching Ellie arrange painted rocks around a small memorial garden they'd made for Ryder. The gentle breeze carried the scent of approaching autumn, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. In her heart, she felt the first stirrings of the same certainty that had guided her daughter that gray afternoon at the gas station. The knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply be kind. The morning of the memorial ride dawned clear and cool, the Kentucky hills wrapped in autumn's golden light. 1 month had passed since Lucy's letter changed everything. Now, hundreds of motorcycles lined Main Street, their chrome gleaming in the early sun. Riders from 12 different states had come to honor one of their own. Lucy stood at the front of the convoy, her heart thundering in time with the idling engines. Ellie clutched her hand, wearing her pink sneakers and a tiny leather vest the Brotherhood had made for her. The gathered crowd was a sea of leather jackets, bandanas, and weather-worn faces. Sheriff Henson approached them, his badge catching the sunlight. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'd be honored to lead the escort." The same man who'd once watched her house with suspicion now stood as an ally, his patrol car's lights ready to guide them through town. Lucy unfolded a piece of paper, her hands trembling slightly. Ellie had written it the night before, her careful 7-year-old handwriting filled with love. As Lucy began to read, the rumble of engines fell silent. "Dear Ryder and all our biker friends," Lucy's voice carried across the hushed crowd. "You helped us when no one else did. You made our town believe again." She paused, watching tears fall freely down faces that had seen too much hardship, too much judgment. The convoy moved like a river of chrome and thunder through the streets. Townspeople who had once peered through curtains with suspicion now stood along the sidewalks, waving American flags. Outside the hospital, Lucy's co-workers raised signs reading, "We remember." Children sat on their parents' shoulders, pointing at the endless line of bikes. At sunset, they gathered at the memorial stone erected near the gas station where it all began. Lucy knelt beside the granite marker, gently placing Ellie's first pair of pink shoes, the ones from the shoebox, at its base. "You found your way home," she whispered, touching the cold stone. The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and around her, hundreds stood in respectful silence. The air felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of judgment and misunderstanding had finally lifted from their small town. Forgiveness settled over the hills like a gentle blanket, wrapping them all in its healing embrace. The autumn weeks brought new life to the Turner home. Where silence once lived, laughter now echoed through rooms warmed by purpose and friendship. Lucy's kitchen had transformed into the bustling headquarters of the Gas for Good Foundation, with manila folders stacked neatly beside her cookie jar and photographs of smiling bikers pinned to her bulletin board. "Mama, look! Another donation came in!" Ellie bounded through the door, waving an envelope from the mailbox. Lucy smiled, watching her daughter sort the mail with the same care she'd once counted coins for a stranger's gas. The hospital board had done more than just reinstate Lucy. They'd celebrated her. Dr. Reynolds, who'd once warned her about bad influences, now praised her exceptional community leadership during staff meetings. She wore her nurse's uniform with renewed pride, knowing that healing happened in many ways. Every Friday morning, like clockwork, 3 or 4 motorcycles would rumble up their gravel driveway. The bikers, now familiar faces in the community, helped organize fuel vouchers and food boxes for families struggling to make ends meet. Mrs. Peterson from 2 streets over no longer clutched her purse when they passed. Instead, she baked them chocolate chip cookies. On this particular morning, the air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. A cherry-red Harley-Davidson stood gleaming in the driveway, its rider helping Ellie adjust her new helmet. The pink paint job sparkled in the morning sun, detailed with delicate angel wings, a gift from the brotherhood that brought tears to Lucy's eyes every time she saw it. "Ready for your ride, Princess?" Big Mike asked, his weathered face gentle as he checked the helmet's strap one final time. Ellie bounced with excitement, her small frame barely containing her joy. Lucy watched from the porch, her coffee growing cold in her hands as Ellie settled onto the back of the motorcycle. They rolled down the driveway slowly, Ellie's excited wave making Lucy's heart swell. Together, bike and riders disappeared around the bend, past golden fields where farmers paused their work to wave back at the little girl who'd taught their town about trust. Tears slipped down Lucy's cheeks, but her smile remained steady. In the distance, the sound of the motorcycle engine merged with the morning breeze, carrying with it memories of Ryder's deep laugh and the profound truth he'd helped them discover, that sometimes the smallest gesture of kindness could illuminate countless lives, like stars appearing one by one in the evening sky. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, Make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.